Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When rancher Cody Blair returned home from a business trip, he expected silence and whiskey by the lake, not a steel fence cutting across his land. What began as a trespass turned into war. They stole his access. Now he controls their water, and he's just getting started. Let me tell you something about rage. Not the kind that boils slowly. I mean the type that strikes like a rattlesnake, coiled tight for days, then sinking its fangs right into your nerves the moment you round a corner and see a 7-foot steel fence where your gravel road used to be. That was me, a few hours after returning to my ranch from a business trip in Austin, where I'd spent the past 2 weeks locking in a multi-million-dollar water delivery contract. I was tired, road grimy, and ready to spend the evening by my lake with a bottle of rye and some silence. Instead, I found a goddamn barricade, and it had signs. Not just any signs. White aluminum boards bolted into the fence. Bold black font. Private property. HOA access only. No trespassing. My name was nowhere in sight. But the kicker, that fence ran straight across the only western approach to my lake. The same private road I had driven and maintained for over 20 years. And just beyond the barrier, right at the shoreline, I could make out the gleam of fresh gravel. Someone had dumped rocks over my access path, completely sealing it. I put my truck in park and got out slowly. The silence was unnatural. No bugs, no birds, just the wind whistling through a crime scene. About 30 feet away, a group of workers, 4 of them, maybe 5, stood beside a small excavator, 2 pickup trucks, and a stack of fencing panels, all unmarked. One of them, a guy with a clipboard and a nervous mustache, noticed me filming with my phone and muttered something to the others. Within seconds, the crew scrambled like raccoons caught in a spotlight. They didn't even try to talk. Engines roared, tires spun, and within a minute, all that was left was a fresh cloud of Oklahoma dust and an unattended pair of work gloves in the dirt. I leaned on the steel, gave it a shove. Concrete footings, welded joints. Whoever built this didn't do it in a hurry, and didn't expect me to return so soon. Back at the house, I dropped my bag, grabbed my coffee-stained paper map from the drawer, and rolled it out across the dining table. My land covered roughly 6,000 acres. Every fence post, water line, and pump station I knew like the back of my calloused hand. And that lake, the one the HOA just decided to gate off like it was their community dog park, was smack dab in the middle of it. My great-grandfather had dug part of it himself. I'd stocked it with base 3 summers ago. Hell, my private fishing pier was still there, on my side. At least it was, the last time I checked. The problem was, things had changed while I was gone. On the western border of my property stood a cluster of pastel-colored houses with stone mailboxes and sad palm trees trucked in from God knows where. Silver Creek Lakeside Villas. The sign read, last time I drove by, HOA run naturally, and run, if memory served, by a woman named Karen Wincroft. You could smell the entitlement before you even turned onto their street. I called up the county planning office, told them I needed information on any permits filed concerning construction near Parcel 42 North, my lake perimeter. The guy on the other end sounded distracted, like he was sorting paper clips. Then he said, "Hold on, I think there was a temporary easement filed. Hang on." I did not hang on. I grabbed my truck keys and stormed out. A temporary what? Before dark, I walked the entire perimeter with a drone flying overhead, streaming footage directly to my iPad. Every square inch of that fence, every bolt and bracket, every pile of gravel, it was all inside my land. No inch of it strayed over to Silver Creek's side. And yet, someone had filed a document with the county claiming that portion of the lake had been mistakenly listed as private when mapped over the community recreation zone. I couldn't decide if I was livid or impressed. That was bold. Stupid, but bold. Someone in that HOA had filed a claim saying my lake was public. My lake, with 0 notification, 0 due process, and they'd done it while I was away. Well, I was back now, and if they thought this was going to be some passive standoff, they had another thing coming. Because here's the thing most people don't realize about ranchers like me. We don't bark, we bite, and the first bite always draws blood. The next morning, I was standing in the county clerk's office with a folder full of documents and a scowl that had already cleared a path through 2 interns and a guy renewing his hunting license. The clerk, a soft-spoken woman named Renee who'd worked this job longer than I'd been alive, took one look at the satellite images I'd printed from the drone feed and muttered, "Well, hell." I'd appreciate more than hell, I said, slapping the folded easement report onto her desk. Explain to me how someone files a temporary restriction on my goddamn lake access and no one notifies me. She adjusted her glasses and sighed. The HOA submitted a request through the Planning Review Board 2 weeks ago. Claimed the lake was inside an unverified recreational overlay zone. The Zoning Commission marked it pending, not permanent. But they filed for a temporary safety barrier to prevent misuse of shared natural resources. It was processed automatically. Automatically, I asked, leaning in. On land they don't own? Renee winced. I don't like it either, but if they claimed ambiguity and no one contested, I was in Austin, I cut her off, signing a goddamn water contract, not exactly sitting on my hands. She gave me a sympathetic look and handed back the file. You need to go to Planning and Code Enforcement. They approved the barrier under an expedited clause. I went straight there. The planning office was housed in a beige building that looked like a DMV married to a hospital waiting room. After an hour of waiting and being redirected twice, I finally got to someone in authority. A thin man named Douglas with a name tag that said Senior Land Use Analyst and a tie that looked like it hadn't seen a steamer in a decade. He flipped through the HOA's application as I stood over him. It says here, the HOA cited community benefit, temporary usage during park planning, and a precedent based on visual public access to the lake. I nearly laughed. Visual access? That's your standard now. Someone sees my lake and that's good enough to claim it? He had the decency to look embarrassed. I admit, the language is vague. No, Douglas, a ransom note is vague. This is fraud. He shuffled awkwardly. It's complicated. If you want to contest this, you'll need a boundary resurvey and a statement of private domain exclusive rights, notarized. A formal cease and desist to the HOA might also help. Might? He shrugged. Depends on how stubborn they are. Buddy, I said, packing up my files, I'm not the one who's going to be stubborn. That same afternoon, I hired a drone operator from Tulsa to do a full 4K flyover and boundary match overlay. I also paid out of pocket for a land rights attorney, just in case this escalated further, which I knew damn well it would. I wasn't wrong. The next morning, a knock at my gate startled the dogs. When I came out, there she was, Karen Winkcroft in the flesh, dressed like a walking HOA policy binder, khaki slacks, golf club polo, and mirrored sunglasses that made her look like a mall cop who never got the memo. She wasn't alone. 2 private security goons flanked her, matching polos, clipboard, earpieces. Overkill for a fence conversation. Mr. Blair, Karen called out sweetly, like she hadn't just fenced off my access to my own water. Lovely property. Hope you had a nice trip. I didn't shake her hand. Karen, cut to it. She smiled tightly and gestured to her folder. We're here on behalf of the Silver Creek HOA to present a proposal, a formal agreement to grant limited recreational access to the community. We believe it's a win-win. I folded my arms. You want me to give you shoreline access. For supervised community use, she said. Picnics, paddle boats, educational nature walks. All in line with our sustainable tourism initiative. I just stared. And if we cooperate, she continued, we won't have to raise concerns about environmental overreach or regulatory inconsistencies in your well-permitting. There it was. I took one step forward, close enough for her to lower that smug little binder. You think you can fence me out, steal access, then blackmail me over my own water rights? Her voice stayed syrupy. I'm simply suggesting we work together. The water board certification renewals are quite complex these days. I held up my phone. This conversation's being recorded. You can explain complexity to my attorney. Karen smirked. You can play hardball, Cody, but remember, your business only runs as long as the county says it can. We have friends, committees. I smiled back. You don't know who you're dealing with. She turned on her heel, security in tow, and strutted back to her Tahoe like a villain exiting a budget thriller. She had no idea I owned half the infrastructure that kept her people's showers running, and I had just made the decision to let that fact become very real to them. 2 days after Karen strutted off my land like she'd just claimed a colony, I flipped the switch. Not literally, yet, but close. At 6 a.m., I made a quiet little change in the system that only a handful of people even knew existed. I pulled scheduled maintenance for Pump Station 3 from bi-weekly to pending. Just a few clicks, just a delay, no trucks sent, no checks done, just inaction. Funny thing about water infrastructure, without active maintenance, small problems become big ones. Fast. By 10 that morning, the first complaints started to roll in. Low pressure in the Western District, faucets sputtering, toilets refilling slow as molasses, Silver Creek was running thirsty, and I was just getting started. I spent the rest of the morning filing official notices with the County Health Department and the Water Oversight Board. Postponed maintenance due to unresolved land conflict obstructing safe access routes to equipment. That's bureaucratic code for, if you don't want me on my land, don't ask me to run utilities across it. And then I waited. It didn't take long. By the next afternoon, Silver Creek's community Facebook group, normally reserved for garage sales and dog poop complaints, was on fire. Karen's name was tagged in every post like she was the president of FEMA. Why don't we have water? Toilets dry. What's going on with the pump house? She tried to do damage control, of course, claimed there was a temporary interruption due to routine upgrades. A lie, obviously. You can't upgrade what you've blocked access to with a goddamn steel fence. I watched it all unfold while sitting on my porch, whiskey in one hand, drone footage of the fencing in the other. My lawyer, Rachel, called me later that night. "You're playing hardball," she said. "I'm not playing," I replied. "I'm enforcing boundaries." She chuckled. "Well, if they push, I'm ready." They pushed. Around midnight, my motion sensor alerts went off. East Perimeter, Pump Station 3. I pulled up the feed and saw him. A guy in a security polo, black gloves, trying to duck behind a maintenance shed. He had bolt cutters in one hand and what looked like a damn blueprint in the other. One of Karen's goons. Not even bothering to hide it. I grabbed my rifle, my flashlight, and my shoulder holster. I knew better than to confront him alone, but I wasn't about to wait while someone tampered with $1 million setup. I approached fast and loud, letting him hear the gravel crunch under my boots. "Step away from the pump station," I barked. He froze, dropped the cutters, tried to turn and bolt, but I was faster. Tackle wasn't elegant, I'm 45, not 20, but I got him on the ground and wrenched his arm behind his back until he stopped struggling. "You just trespassed on federal water equipment, genius," I growled. "That's not a HOA violation. That's felony sabotage." He mumbled something about just checking on a leak, but his shaking hand said otherwise. I called the sheriff's office. Officer Jenkins showed up within 15 minutes. Tall guy, real Oklahoma energy. When I showed him the footage and the guy's tools, Jenkins just let out a low whistle. "You want to press charges?" he asked. "I want this on record," I said. "Trespassing, intent to sabotage, attempted interference with critical infrastructure." They hauled the guy off in cuffs, muttering about how Karen told him it was legal. The next morning, my arm ached like hell from the scuffle, and my shoulder felt like it had been hit with a sledgehammer. Turns out I'd torn something. Doc at Urgent Care said rotator cuff strain. Sling for 2 weeks minimum. Great. But I wasn't the only one hurting. By noon, Silver Creek had gone fully dry. Fire hydrants, too. One of their residents posted a TikTok crying in her backyard, garden hose limp, talking about how her HOA was starving them. I got a call that evening from a blocked number. "Cody," came Karen's voice, brittle and breathless. "We need to talk." "Too late for talking," I said. "Now it's paperwork and lawyers." "Please," she said, her tone shifting like ice cracking underfoot. "People are scared. There are children here." "You've made your point." "I haven't even begun," I said and hung up. Let her squirm. Let them all squirm. They fenced off my lake and tried to bully me with bureaucracy. Now their taps were dry, and their president's hired muscle was sitting in county lockup. The board of directors at Silver Creek was starting to realize something very inconvenient. You don't pick a fight with the man who controls your water supply. It didn't take long for the crisis to evolve into chaos. By the end of that week, Silver Creek was on the verge of full-scale meltdown. 52 homes without reliable running water. Garden sprinklers dead. Toilets dry. Showers sputtering out like dying lungs. You'd have thought I'd bombed the Hoover Dam from the way people were talking. Their Facebook page had turned into a digital bonfire, with half the residents demanding Karen's resignation and the other half praying the county would step in and fix what that ranch psycho had caused. That's what they were calling me now, the ranch psycho. I liked it. Better than being a doormat. Officially, I still hadn't shut off the water. I'd simply declined to maintain the delivery systems. Safety first, as they say. The fact that the failure coincided with a trespassing incident and a torn rotator cuff was, of course, purely coincidental. But optics? Optics were everything, and Karen was losing hers fast. She tried to go on the local news. I watched it from my living room, arm in a sling, coffee in hand, while she stood in front of a sad, dry fountain near Silver Creek's front gate, flanked by two confused residents holding handmade signs that read, "Water is a human right," and "Fix our." Taps not your ego. Karen, wearing her HOA president badge like a sheriff's star, looked like a country club vampire caught in daylight. "We believe the actions taken by Mr. Blair constitute a clear abuse of utility control and possibly even a public health violation," she said, struggling to keep the sweat off her upper lip. "This is not how neighbors treat each other." I almost choked on my coffee. Within an hour of the segment airing, my inbox lit up. Journalists, county supervisors, a lawyer or two fishing for sound bites. One message stood out. An official notice from the County Resource Management Office requesting an emergency review of my permit operations. Not a full audit, but damn near close. Rachel, my attorney, was already on it. "They want to corner you," she said. "Make you look like the aggressor. I'm not the one who built a fence on someone else's land. Doesn't matter. This is politics now. You're on every HOA watch list in Oklahoma." "So be it," I said. But politics cuts both ways. While Karen was busy spinning stories, I was digging, and what I found made my blood hum. A little clause in the Silver Creek HOA charter, buried in the back pages, where only the desperate or the obsessive dare to tread, outlined the exact criteria required for emergency infrastructure override. Basically, if their water supply provider failed them, and if it could be proven that the HOA was responsible for obstructing critical infrastructure, they forfeited all municipal support and were subject to disconnection from county grid priority. Translation: if this went to arbitration and the fence was ruled illegal, the HOA wouldn't just lose access to my water, they'd lose their eligibility for emergency hookup to any other supplier for up to 6 months. That meant dry pipes unless they trucked in water at market prices. I smiled. That night, a new twist dropped. Sheriff Jenkins called me directly. "You're gonna love this," he said. "One of Karen's security guys just spilled his guts." Turns out the guy they'd arrested at Pump Station 3 had a change of heart. Maybe it was the holding cell. Maybe it was the threat of federal charges. Maybe he just realized Karen wouldn't be paying his legal bills. Either way, he sang like a church soprano. He confessed that not only had Karen instructed him to inspect the pumps, but she'd personally provided schematics of the station and a false access authorization printed no less with the HOA letterhead. Sheriff forwarded me the scanned document. It was laughably fake, but it bore her signature. This wasn't just trespassing anymore. Now it was document fraud, attempted sabotage, and interference with critical infrastructure. Felonies. Multiple. Rachel nearly purred when she read the statement. "We go public," she said. "Press conference, documents, timeline. You holding the moral high ground with a sling on your arm and a sheriff's quote in your back pocket? That's a PR dream." I nodded. "Do it." The next day, Rachel and I held a brief outdoor press event on the front porch of my ranch office. She read a calm, devastating statement outlining every step taken by Karen Winkcroft and the HOA. From the unauthorized fencing, to the false permit filing, to the attempted sabotage of water systems. The final flourish. Copies of drone images, boundary surveys, and the arrest report with the security guard's confession. The story exploded. Local media ran it for 3 nights straight. Online outlets picked it up too. "Oklahoma rancher fights back against HOA overreach" became a trending topic. The meme kids found a screenshot of Karen's dry fountain speech and layered it with the caption, "Let them drink HOA bylaws." I didn't laugh, not out loud, but I felt it in my ribs. By the time the county announced a formal investigation into the HOA's zoning practices, Silver Creek had fully turned on their queen. Residents were demanding a recall vote. One woman stood outside the HOA office with a megaphone yelling, "Karen, release the water or release your throne." I didn't say a word. I just waited and watched the empire she built around ornamental shrubs and fake authority begin to crack. 3 days after the press conference, I got a call from a man named Hector Salinas. Soft voice, thick Texas accent, district investigator from the State Office of Zoning Integrity. He said he'd been assigned to review the claims against Silver Creek HOA, particularly their temporary access permit, and whether or not it had been obtained through falsified boundaries. "Hector," I said, "you want the short version or the stack of documents that could kill a horse?" He chuckled. "Give me both." By the time he arrived at my ranch later that afternoon, I had everything laid out on the conference table in my workshop: boundary maps, historical deeds, drone images, the HOA charter, the security guard statement. Hell, I even printed Karen's ridiculous flyer about Silver Creek Shore access zones, where she had mapped picnic benches onto my land like she was planning a kindergarten field trip. Hector reviewed the files in silence for a long time. Every now and then, he'd let out a quiet "Dios mío" under his breath. When he got to the forged HOA authorization for the pump station, he looked up at me with genuine disbelief. She actually submitted this? Printed it? Signed it? Used it to send a man with bolt cutters onto a federal water node? He nodded slowly. That's a different level of stupid. No arguments here. He spent the rest of the day on site photographing the fence, measuring the exact encroachment line, over 17 feet inside my property according to the GPS marker. By sunset, he had more than enough. "This is going to court," he said, "but it won't be civil. Not anymore." I didn't smile. Not this time. I just said, "Good." But that wasn't the only call I got that week. On Friday evening, just as I was finishing repairs on the ATV trail down near the North Pasture, my phone buzzed with a restricted number. I almost ignored it, but something made me swipe. A man's voice came through, older, quiet, with the cautious tone of someone walking a legal tightrope. "Mr. Blair, my name is Walter Dunlap. I'm on the Silver Creek HOA board, vice chair. I wanted to speak privately." I didn't say anything, just let the silence stretch. "I didn't vote for the fence," he continued. "I objected to the access permit. I've got the meeting minutes to prove it." "Why are you calling me?" There was a pause. "Because I think you should know, Karen's been doing things behind our backs. She made a side agreement with a real estate firm, promised them shared shoreline access for a development expansion. She's been selling view lot upgrades for 6 months. $70,000 per property." I exhaled through my teeth. "People bought premium land based on lies," he added. "She faked internal memos to say the board approved it. Some of us are planning to file ethics complaints. Maybe criminal referrals." "You'd better," I said. "I also wanted to warn you. She's filing an injunction, emergency court order. Claims your water cutoff is retaliatory and dangerous." "Of course she is. But," he said quickly, "she's not doing it through the HOA's council. She hired her own firm in Tulsa. This is personal now." That changed things. The next morning, Rachel filed a preemptive motion to deny any emergency injunction, attaching 15 exhibits proving that the HOA's obstruction of pump access was the actual cause of the water disruption. She included everything: Hector's preliminary zoning report, the sheriff's affidavit, and the maintenance logs showing precisely when service was halted and why. We filed it at 9 a.m. At 10:30, Karen's lawyers filed their injunction. At noon, the judge threw it out. The order read in part, "The petitioner's claims lack merit in light of presented evidence demonstrating obstruction, misrepresentation, and probable fraud." And just like that, her legal missile fizzled on the launch pad. But the fallout didn't stop. 2 homeowners who'd purchased those view upgrades showed up at my gate later that day. I recognized one of them from the Facebook threads, an older guy named Tom who'd previously accused me of terrorizing retirees. Now he looked like someone had run over his Lexus. "I think we got scammed," he said. "She said we'd have lake access. Even showed us a map." I just nodded and pointed to the marker stone at the edge of my property. Private land. No access, no exceptions. Tom stared at it for a long moment, then muttered, "Hell. You might want to talk to a lawyer," I said. "Oh, we will." That night, someone posted the entire HOA meeting transcript online, anonymously, but everyone knew it came from Dunlap. The minutes included Karen's quote, "He won't stop us. He's just a rancher. We can handle a rancher." It got shared over 1,000 times, memed, mocked, screenshotted into digital history. Karen didn't make a statement. Not this time. And Silver Creek? Silver Creek was starting to boil from the inside. By the time the county launched its official fraud investigation into Silver Creek's zoning permits, the HOA was eating itself alive. The board held an emergency meeting, and for once they didn't dare try it behind closed doors. Residents demanded transparency, and someone, probably that same anonymous whistleblower, live-streamed the whole mess to Facebook. I didn't plan to watch it. I really didn't. But when Rachel texted me, "You're gonna want popcorn for this," I poured a whiskey, sat back on my porch, and tuned in. The stream opened on a shaky camera inside Silver Creek's community center. Fold-out tables, plastic chairs, one sad American flag in the corner. Karen stood at the front like she was still in control, flipping through papers while half the audience scowled. A balding man in a maroon polo raised his hand. "Karen, did you or did you not authorize the fence using falsified boundary claims?" She gave a thin smile. I acted based on our legal team's interpretation of the recreational overlay. "Which legal team?" someone shouted. "HOA council says they didn't know about any of it." Karen tried to pivot. "We needed access to the lake for shared enjoyment. Our neighborhood was promised these amenities when we bought in." "Then sue the realtor," someone else barked. "You don't get to steal from the guy who provides our damn water." That's when it happened. Tom, the same guy who'd stood at my gate days earlier, stood up and slammed a binder on the table in front of her. "This is my contract. It says I paid $70,000 extra for guaranteed shoreline access and use." "There is no shoreline. There is no access. That lake is not yours. It never was. You lied, and now the whole neighborhood's paying for it. You could see it then." The crack, the facade Karen had built, of quiet authority, of suburban superiority, of rules and order and clean landscaping, it shattered in real time. Her lips moved, but no one heard the excuses. The room had turned on her like a pack of starved dogs. She left that meeting without finishing the agenda, and that was just the beginning. Over the next 48 hours, 3 more board members resigned. Karen's house was egged twice. Someone spray-painted "Lake Liar" on her mailbox. One resident posted drone footage of the entire fence with sarcastic commentary, calling it the Berlin Wall of HOA delusion. It got over 200,000 views. But while the neighborhood imploded, I had bigger problems. Early Sunday morning, my ranch foreman Clay came pounding on the door. "You need to see this," he said, pale-faced and breathless. He led me down to Pump Station 2, where we found something I hadn't expected. A makeshift borehole freshly dug in the tree line behind the station. A rented drill rig still sat nearby, abandoned but reeking of fuel. Clay had found it while checking the irrigation pressure. There were PVC pipes running downhill, crudely laid, clearly new, aimed toward Silver Creek's western boundary. They had tried to tap into my aquifer, illegally, unpermitted, desperate. I stood there staring at the equipment, the half-buried line, the small crater in the earth. Then I looked over at the ridge and realized what had really happened. Karen, or someone acting on her behalf, had hired a crew to come in overnight and illegally drill a siphon line into my underground water source. They couldn't win through permits. They couldn't win through court. So now they were stealing it. Clay handed me a USB stick. "Camera caught the plates on the truck. Already downloaded." Rachel's voice cracked with fury when I called her. "They're done," she hissed. "That's water theft, environmental violation, tampering with registered aquifer systems. Do you understand how many federal laws that breaks?" I did, and I was already dialing Jenkins. The sheriff's office showed up fast. They roped off the site with caution tape, took statements, confiscated the equipment. By that afternoon, an EPA investigator was on site with a clipboard and a grim look. "You're going to want to press charges," he said. "We will too. This kind of breach can contaminate the entire system if left unchecked." "How bad is it?" I asked. "Could have been worse. They didn't reach the active layer, but if they'd turned on pressure, they might have fractured the casing." And then, collapse, leaching, runoff contamination. So, not just theft, environmental terrorism. Karen never showed up. But that night, someone dumped a stack of HOA internal emails in a public Dropbox folder. Hundreds of files, memos, discussions, and one particularly damning PDF, a signed directive from Karen to a private contractor authorizing aquifer access installation for emergency backup feed. Expedite discreetly. The Dropbox link spread like wildfire. Reddit, Twitter, the local news. Within hours, the county prosecutor's office announced it was opening a criminal investigation. And Rachel. She filed an amended complaint seeking damages for attempted resource theft and reckless endangerment. I sat at my kitchen table reading that email over and over. She really tried to drill into my water, not metaphorically, literally. This wasn't about property lines anymore. This was about desperation, power, and the brutal stupidity of someone who thought laws didn't apply to her gated fantasy land. Silver Creek wasn't just out of water now. They were out of options. The trial was set for early March. But by the time it rolled around, Karen Winkcroft was already a ghost. Not legally. No, she still had her expensive lawyer, her brittle hair, and her bleached white smile. But in every other sense, she was done. The residents of Silver Creek no longer returned her emails. The HOA board had voted unanimously to remove her from her position. Her house sat quiet, blinds closed, the once perfect landscaping now wilting from the lack of water and interest alike. But she still showed up in court every day like she thought she could control the narrative with posture alone. She couldn't. The courtroom was small, county level, but packed with media. Local outlets, regional blogs, a podcast crew that wouldn't stop whispering into clip-on mics. Everyone wanted a piece of the suburban disaster where a HOA president tried to hijack a rancher's lake and nearly poisoned an aquifer doing it. The charges were stacked: criminal trespass, falsifying official documents, environmental violation, attempted theft of resources, reckless endangerment, fraud by misrepresentation. The DA wasn't playing games, and neither was Rachel. I testified on the second day. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with the patience of a drill sergeant and the hearing of a hawk. Rachel led me through my timeline: the fence, the fake permits, the threats, the sabotage, the unauthorized drilling. I spoke clearly, calmly, wore my best boots and my cleanest denim jacket. Even the sling was gone now, though my shoulders still ached when it rained. I showed them the drone footage, the schematics, the notarized deeds. I read aloud from Karen's own emails, including the one where she'd instructed a contractor to treat the rancher like a squatter with PR. The courtroom went silent at that, but the real blow came when they brought in Hector Salinas. He'd finished his full zoning audit weeks ago, and his final report was a masterpiece of bureaucratic precision. It laid out, page by damning page, how Karen had knowingly filed forged site maps, claimed public easement on private land, and lied to county officers about temporary recreational designations that never existed in any ordinance. He even had internal emails from the planning department showing that Karen had pressured a junior clerk to expedite the permit by implying she had personal approval from above. Then came the EPA's expert witness, a geologist named Dr. Janice Harper, who explained in dry, terrifying detail what might have happened if Karen's unauthorized borehole had actually punctured the active aquifer layer. Contamination spread up to 4 miles, pressure fracture, possible collapse, worst-case scenario, permanent loss of viability to one of the only clean groundwater sources in this half of the county. Karen's lawyer tried to object. The judge shut it down. By the 4th day, the defense was running on fumes. Karen never took the stand. Probably smart. The jury looked at her like she was a deer wearing a tiara. No one bought the misunderstood visionary act anymore. On the 5th day, the verdict came in. Guilty on all counts. The sentence: 15 years. The courtroom erupted. Not in cheers, this wasn't a movie, but in a kind of stunned exhale, like a pressure valve had finally been released. Karen sat stone still at the defense table, staring at the wood grain like it might explain where she went wrong. She was led away in handcuffs. No farewell speech, no final glare in my direction. That wasn't the end of it. The HOA, what was left of it, was ordered to pay $2.3 million in damages. That included punitive costs for the fencing, the attempted sabotage, and the risk posed by the illegal drill. The money wouldn't all come from Karen. It came from the HOA's insurance, their reserve fund, and, painfully, a special assessment on every remaining homeowner in Silver Creek. Needless to say, those residents were not thrilled. Many of them moved, others sold at a loss. Some stayed, bitter and wary, but no longer under the illusion that community living meant mutual respect. The judge also issued a rare injunction. Silver Creek HOA was officially barred from accessing any portion of my property indefinitely and irrevocably. And me. I stood on the porch of the courthouse, boots on concrete, wind in my collar, and watched the flashbulbs pop. I didn't say much to the press, just this: private land is private for a reason. You fence off someone's water, you'd better be ready for a drought. Then I walked away. A month after the trial, Silver Creek was a different place. The manicured lawns were still there, but the neighborhood smile had vanished. For sale signs dotted the streets like gravestones, and half the houses that once boasted Lake View in bold on their listings were now quietly rebranded as tranquil and private. Karen's house sold at a foreclosure auction. A real estate investor out of Tulsa bought it for pennies on the dollar. Word is, he turned it into a short-term rental called the Lake House Escape. The irony was so thick you could pave roads with it. Me. I went back to my rhythm. The ranch needed me. Spring meant foaling season, fencing repairs, and prepping pasture rotation. The pumps were back on schedule. Maintenance crews had full access. My lawyers were still working through the settlement details, but I wasn't in a hurry. That money wouldn't bring back time, but it would rebuild the trail around the lake. Maybe add a second dock. A week after the verdict, I held a small get-together by the water. Not a press event, not a party, just a barbecue with folks from town who'd backed me, neighbors who respected the line between friendly and entitled. We grilled ribs, drank cold beer, and skipped stones across the surface of the lake that for a moment had become a battlefield. Near sunset, the kids wandered down to the pier. Some of them had never fished before. One little girl, maybe 7, caught a bluegill the size of her hand and screamed like she'd hauled in a shark. Her dad helped her release it, and she asked him if the lake was really ours. He looked over at me, then said, "It's his. But he shares it when people treat it right." I didn't say anything, just nodded. The new sign went up a few days later. I carved it myself from local cedar and mounted it on a split stone base, right where the old gravel road met the lake path, the same place Karen's fence once stood. Private land. Trespassers will be prosecuted. No public access, no exceptions. And below that, in smaller letters, the water here isn't for the thirsty. It's for those who know what it means to keep it clean. I didn't build walls. I didn't need to. Nature had a way of reminding people where their reach ended. A fence can't hold back a flood. A fake permit can't dam up consequence. People like Karen thought power came from titles, from paperwork, from committees and chairs and bylaws. But out here, power still meant something else. Knowing the land, honoring it, and defending it when it's threatened. The lake is still mine. The land is still mine, and now, finally, peace is mine too.